Good day, grade 12s. We're starting a new section of the syllabus, which is the economic geography, and our lesson today looks at the structure of the economy. We'll be looking at primary, secondary, and tertiary sectors, and then the last two not as well known, quaternary and quinary sectors. Can I offer you a cup of coffee, says the human services frog from the tertiary sector. So first up, we've got the primary sector, and this is often referred to as the extraction sector. So this includes economic activities concerned with the extraction of natural resources, hence the extraction sector. It includes agriculture, forestry, fishing, hunting, mining, and quarrying. I just want to clarify here, the hunting here is most definitely not tourism-based hunting safaris, but we're looking more at subsistence hunting, sort of hunting for food, hunting for own use. And then also the mining and quarrying are often put together just under mining. So generally, the less developed a country is, the more it's going to rely on income generated in this sector. And the largest percentage of the population is employed then in the primary sector. There's a term that we need to have a look at here. We're going to look at it again later, but it's something I want you to bear in mind. It's called benefication. The definition is the enhancement of a product's value, usually through the manufacturing process. So let's have a look at that later. So then the secondary sector, here we call it the production sector. It's concerned with the processing of raw materials through a manufacturing process. Building and construction are also included in here. Other examples are the textile manufacturing, food processing, automotive and chemical processing. Also the provision of utilities, which is water, electricity and gas. These also fall into the secondary sector. This sector usually involves factories and warehousing. Then the tertiary sector, we call this the services sector. And here services are provided. These are divided into human services, which include health, education, tourism, recreation, and entertainment. And physical services. We're looking at banking, financial services, libraries, and refuse removal. So I just want you to note the differences here between human and physical services. Human services normally include person-to-person contact, whereas physical services do not necessarily have the actual human contact. For example, refuse removal. You put your rubbish out and someone comes and takes it away. You don't normally interact with those people. Then these last two, quaternary and quinary sectors. They are derived from the tertiary sector, and the quaternary sector involves things like intellectual services, telesales call centers, data processing, and then the dissemination of information, which is the collation and distribution of information. So, for example, the SABC would be classified under this. The quinary sector is the highest level of decision-making in a country. So here we'd be looking at the national government, judiciary, and also the National Defence Force. The statistics that we're going to look at under statistical and graphical information are from 2011. It's not the newest statistics, but it just gives us an idea of what statistics are telling us. So in 2011, South Africa had just over 13 million people employed in the formal sector. Note I say formal sector. Towards the end of this section, we're going to look at the informal sector. So if we look here, 7% of the population is employed in the primary sector, and they are generating 12% of the country's GDP. When we talk about a country's economy, we talk about the GDP. And this is the value of goods and services that all the employed people in a country produce in a year. And that then is the gross domestic product. So referring to that figure we saw in the previous slide, about 930,000 workers are employed in the primary sector, and they're producing 12% of the country's GDP. A further 2.8 million people employed in the secondary sector, with the biggest employers being manufacturing and construction. There are 68% of the employed people work in the tertiary sector, and they're generating about 61% of the GDP. And then finally, there were about 3% of the population was employed in the quaternary sector, generating 6% of South Africa's GDP. Of course, all of these stats were for 2011. So here we see in recent years, quaternary and quinary sectors have been recognized, although they're still expanding, it's still new. So statistics in South Africa and a lot of other statistics that you'll see are still including them, in fact, in the tertiary sector. So the use of statistical and graphical comparisons over time show us trends and changes in the economic structure. These also then tell us about the development level of a country as a whole, or even, as we see here, a breakdown of the provinces. So in 2011, Gauteng was contributing the most to the GDP, the country's GDP, with 34.5%. Here in Limpopo, it was standing at 7.1%. And then the smallest one was the Northern Cape at 2.2%. So some of the reasons why certain parts of the country contribute less is that the climate is perhaps not suited to agriculture. So if we look at climate, Northern Cape most definitely, it's on the western side of the country, a much drier, more arid part of the country. And then population density, it also goes to climate where it started with. Gauteng is densely populated in comparison to the Northern Cape, and the level of development in Gauteng is immense in comparison to what's happening in the Northern Cape.